order. Ashley, would you please call the roll?
Calling the roll, Mr. Jones.
Here.
Ms. Stevens.
Present.
Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon's absent at the moment. Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Mr. Brady.
Here.
We have a quorum. Also like the record to reflect that council members Baker and Miller are also in attendance.
Excellent, excellent. Again, welcome everyone. Welcome. Just like to share with you, for those who may have parked in the garage next door, you can speak with Miss Ashley Johnson. She has parking tickets for anyone who doesn't want to pay the full price for being here today. All right. So at this time, Ashley, has anyone signed in for public comment?
Yes, we have 4 speakers signed in. Ms. Anthony. Thank you.
Good morning, Council President Dan Brady, Community Development Chair Councilman Jones, and all members of Council that are present today. My name is Erica Anthony, and I'm the Vice President of Government Relations and Strategy for Cleveland Neighborhood Progress. As many of you are aware, Cleveland Neighborhood Progress is a 30-year-old local funding intermediary for the community development corporations here in the city of Cleveland. Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, as well as many organizations represented here today, have been members of the County Housing Stakeholder Group for the last several years. The group is led by Enterprise Community Partners, which is a national funding intermediary, a national community and economic development funding intermediary. The following letter was emailed in advance to all council members by Emily Lungard of Enterprise Community Partners. Dear council members, the County Housing Stakeholder Group, here and referred to as the Stakeholder Group, would like to deeply thank County Council for your leadership on the growing and urgent housing needs in our community. We are encouraged by the introduction of ordinance number 2019-0001 to create the County Housing Program, and we are eager to work with council leadership on a comprehensive approach to housing stability. As you know, the stakeholder group began convening several years ago. We represent a diverse set of interests and constituencies, yet all share one goal: creating and advancing an equitably resourced and comprehensive approach to housing for Cuyahoga County residents. The stakeholder group is committed to creating a community known for its programs and policies that will address the housing needs of all of its residents, particularly those that are low-income renters and homeowners, as well as those individual families who are severe cost burden, face discrimination or foreclosure, or have difficulty obtaining economic self-sufficiency because of the lack of affordable housing or lack of housing near economic opportunities. The stakeholder group envisions a future where vacant and abandoned houses have all been rehabilitated or removed in order to stabilize neighborhoods, maintain and increase property values, and provide home ownership opportunities. We believe that the proposed county housing program represents significant progress toward making this vision a reality. We would like to especially thank County Council for recognizing this stakeholders group's county housing plan in the proposed legislation. As the legislation highlights, the stakeholder group, in partnership with the County Department of Development, worked diligently to develop a county housing plan that strategizes around 6 comprehensive housing issue areas. Those issue areas include access to capital, tax delinquency and foreclosure, special populations, housing insecurity, fair housing, and confidence in the housing market. We look forward to carefully reviewing the proposed legislation and working with council leadership to ensure that all aspects of the county's housing needs can be fully addressed in the coming years. As always, we hope the stakeholder group can serve as a resource to the county. As you will see contained within the letter, there are 13 organizations signed on to this letter. We do have one additional organization that is signed on, and we'll be sure to send that updated letter to you so you have the revised version. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Stout.
Stout. And let the record reflect that Councilwoman Sunny Simon is in attendance.
Thank you, Council President Brady, and to all the council members. To the council through the chair, good morning. My name is Abigail Stout. I am the managing attorney of the housing group at the Legal Aid Society of Cleveland. Legal Aid's mission is to secure justice and resolve fundamental problems for those who are low income and vulnerable by providing high-quality legal services and working for systemic solutions. We serve 5 counties, including Cuyahoga, in providing civil legal representation to low-income people. First and foremost, thank you for all of the hard work that has been dedicated to conducting the countywide housing study, to developing the county housing plan, and for introducing Ordinance 2019-0001, the Cuyahoga County Housing Program. It is clear that housing stability, revitalization of our neighborhoods, and the redevelopment of the housing market is, in Cuyahoga is a priority. We commend you for this commitment to the community's housing needs. Legal Aid's housing group focuses on tenants' rights and eviction defense. Over 20,000 evictions occur annually in Cuyahoga County. Tenants evicted from their homes and the instability that follows suffer from more health problems, face more disruption to and loss of employment, and their children have more difficulty in performing in schools. This past year, we formed the Housing Justice Alliance to invest in the community by providing tenants the right to legal counsel. The Housing Justice Alliance is developing a plan to establish a right to counsel for tenants facing eviction in Cleveland. Currently in Cleveland, where 9,000 evictions take place annually and less than 2% of tenants are represented, Our short-term goal is to increase that representation to 10%. So that would be serving about 900 to 1,000 tenants over a course of annually for 3 years. Our hope is that the cost savings and the positive impact on our community will show that all low-income tenants should be represented by counsel. To be even more strategic and comprehensive in its efforts to stabilize home values and to reduce housing insecurity, we urge council to consider addressing the housing insecurity faced by our community members who rent their homes. Many of these households that rent are low income and vulnerable, and as renters, their housing is less secure. Emergency rent assistance, a resource that is really currently hard to come by, could be a meaningful and impactful way to secure the housing of many community members. Again, we are deeply appreciative of the introduction of the housing program. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you.
Mr. Chalfont?
Good morning. My name is Robert Chalfont. I want to thank the council for this opportunity to speak. I'm a resident of the Glenville neighborhood here in Cleveland, and I've rehabbed some homes myself. One of the things I'd like to point out, or what I'd like to address in the current proposed legislation, is the ability to build the capacity of small contractors. Right now, the rules state that the only contractors that would be eligible to participate in the program are those who are fully funded, have the capacity to finish the job without any additional funding coming in. They have to have money before they even start, enough to finish the project. And I understand why you want to do that. But we have several small contractors out there who would like to participate in these programs, but they're simply unable to because of the rules. And I'm wondering if there is a way that you can put in a clause that promotes the capacity development of small contractors here in the Cuyahoga County. Thank you for your time.
And lastly, Ms. Liu?
Good morning, everybody. Well, after we hear all those important comments, let me give you something from a slightly different angle. Supposedly, government is the entity collectively getting the tax or any other resources in order to redistribute to help everybody in the county to progress. This is a very good idea. However, in the middle somewhere, you always have somebody either they didn't get a memo or they just have their own agenda. Last time in the county council meeting, we had another housing advocate here. She even told you, in her own words, she could get a housing. That's because the local CDC told her she and her boyfriend was the desirable people to live in the community. So at that time, I make the clear notation on this. We have lots of people already created successfully by the society as undesirable people. The CDC she was talking about, I have seen lots of people throughout the time coming into homeless shelter because CDC as a doer in the community actually doing the opposite. Instead of helping the people, they actually create gentrification. They actually kick the current residents out of the community in order to establish high-end projects, which they claim will revitalize the community. Is that true? Definitely not. Look from a different angle. If we get all the undesired people out of housing, out of jobs, out of every opportunities they can get, guess what? Only few people will take the responsibility to revitalize the whole community. However, county actually wants to make the whole county as a desirable place for everybody to progress. So that actually defeats the purpose. So it's good that we will have a brand new housing programs. Yes, there are still flaws in there, but that's a big step which will help people out. However, the details, unfortunately, devils still have them. So in this case, please watch out. If a county can really create a better plan, please don't let it fall down to all those high-end projects, because that really doesn't help the whole county. In that case, the so-called undesirable people probably will have a fair chance to prove they are actually desirable. In that case, then we will really have a way to revitalize the whole community, the whole county, instead of just a spotty spots. Thank you very much.
Ashley, is anyone else signed in for public comment?
No, no one else has signed in.
Thank you. At this moment, if we can have a motion to approve our minutes from the December 3rd, 2018 meeting.
So moved.
Moved by Chairman Brady and seconded by Councilman Gallagher. All in favor, say aye. Aye. The minutes are approved. All right, this time, Ashley, if you would read our legislation into the record.
Ordinance number 2019-0001, enacting Chapter 809 and amending Section 704.01 of the Cuyahoga County Code to establish the Cuyahoga County Housing Program.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, and members of the committee. As you know, my name is Michael King, and I sound worse than I feel. And I'm here with Khalil Seren to present the overview of the proposed housing program before you today. As this is a council-sponsored initiative, we've had a chance to discuss a lot of these concepts with you individually, but we're eager to finally present them to you in this forum. So just a quick overview of what we're going to talk about. We'll briefly start with a history of the national foreclosure crisis and talk about some of the federal, state, and local responses to that crisis, demolition in particular, which I know you're all well aware of. Then we'll look at where the housing market stands today, and then finally we'll take provide a brief overview of the housing program. Once we complete this presentation, we'll open it up for questions, and then we have representatives from the Land Bank here as well who are going to play a pivotal role in this program, and they'll be happy to address any particular questions that might be appropriate for them. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Khalil, who's going to start with some history.
Thank you, Michael. So we're all aware. We lived through it. The county experienced some devastating effects from the foreclosure crisis in the late 2000s. You know, our entire economy was affected, but our housing markets were affected especially so. As a result of predatory lending, subprime mortgages, you know, our housing values, people's housing insecurity took a hit. As you can see from the graph here, mortgage foreclosures nationally quintupled. You can also see delinquencies in the over 90 days or more went up dramatically. And so far, in the national sphere, things have come down a bit to pre-crisis levels. I think in Cuyahoga County, however, and this isn't shown on your graph, but in Cuyahoga County, I don't believe that we have recovered to the point where our foreclosure rates are pre-2001 levels, like 95 levels. But we're moving in the right direction on foreclosures. Right now, our foreclosure rate in the county is around 1.3%. As you can see from the chart, the national rate is below 1%, so we're still not doing so great relative to the national rate. So, in response to the foreclosure crisis, and some signs that we'd been seeing in Cuyahoga County and in the state, even before, say, 2008, SB 353 was introduced at the Ohio General Assembly to authorize the creation of land banks. The purpose of these land banks, as shown, is to reclaim, rehabilitate, and reutilize vacant, abandoned, tax foreclosed, or other real property. Put plainly, the idea is to take underperforming property and, or not underperforming, really property that's being a drag on our economy, on our housing market, and rehabilitate it and put it back into productive use. And when property can't immediately be put back into productive use, it's a place to hold property so that they don't become even more of a drag through repeated flipping with out-of-state investors who maybe don't have a clear understanding of what they're taking on when they purchase these properties. The idea is to make sure that, our properties are, some communities, complete bread and butter, and so we want to make sure that these properties stay in good condition and get back into productive use. The land bank is here, so they'll have more information about how they perform those tasks. But just a quick overview of some of the response to the foreclosure crisis and hardest hit funds. Hardest hit was a program initially out of the Troubled Asset Relief Program, the TARP program at the federal level. And the idea behind the Hardest Hit Fund originally was to foreclosure prevention. That was the idea. Help people who are facing foreclosure avoid foreclosure and keep people in their homes. As a result of some research that was done, presented to Treasury, the rules were expanded to allow demolition as a foreclosure prevention activity. The idea is that demolition of the most severely blighted homes increases home values and actually has a demonstrable effect on foreclosure rates. So far, the county has received about $60 million in hardest hit funds for demolition. 51 million of these funds have been spent. These funds go directly to the land bank from the state, so from the feds to the state to the land bank to expend these dollars. And unfortunately, hardest hit funds, well, it could be fortunately, I guess, to ensure some structured expenditure, but hardest hit funds have quite a few strings on them. They are cumbersome to spend. So a land bank has to put a mortgage on a property, own that property and have the lien on the property for 3 years in order to be able to use these funds according to the federal rules. And so as a result, there are a lot of sort of administrative hurdles that the land bank has to go through in order to use these funds. And it also creates a situation where we've got around a little less than 2,000 parcels that are still in the land bank's inventory that require field service. As a result of the cumbersome nature of the hardest hit fund, the county determined that it would supplement these funds with its own Cuyahoga County Demolition Program. And so the Demolition Program, $50 million was pledged during Ed Fitzgerald's tenure as executive. So far, $41 million has been appropriated, and we've got $8 million in reserve on balance. Got 2,600 properties that have been approved for demolition, and 1,500 or so demolitions completed so far. Right now, this is continuing. We've got round 9 of the property demolition program underway, and this particular program has a lot fewer strings than the HHF funds have. So land bank doesn't have to, or the city doesn't have to own the property. It can be a nuisance or a blight on the community, and it has to be declared so. And as a result, you know, for blight remediation, these funds are intended to be used. Right now, this is where we stand in terms of not necessarily the quality of the homes, but something that's indicative of quality is the age of the homes. If homes aren't maintained, just like anything else, they can fall into disrepair. And as you can see from the slide, 75% of Cuyahoga County homes are over 50 years old right now. Some communities have much older homes than that. I'm sure maybe several of you live in some homes that are that old or older. I know I do. I have a century home. Right now, we've got 1,800 homes that are vacant in the county, 18,000 homes that are vacant, sorry, thank you, that are vacant in the county. And as we mentioned earlier, the residential foreclosure filings are higher than the national average. So the takeaway from this is that demolition has reduced the vacancy by reducing the number of blighted homes that are on the market. But we've still got a lot of work to do to get our housing market back into a more healthy shape. So the next step is our new housing program.
Thanks, Khalil. So thank you. Yeah. With that context in mind, we'll now go over the elements of the actual housing program before you today. The program is really designed as a partnership between Cuyahoga County and the land bank. The goals and objectives of the program are going to be defined in ordinance. That, again, the one before you today, and the land bank will act as both the fiscal agent and the administrator of program activities, with a couple of exceptions, which we'll go over momentarily. The funding is going to be a combination of the land bank's DTAC reserves or revenues along with county funds. But one thing to keep in mind, nothing in this new program should really come as a big surprise to anyone. It's been designed to fall in line with the county's housing plan, as was mentioned during public comment, that was presented to this committee last year, as well as the land bank's longer-term strategic planning. So the program's divided into 3 primary components. Each component is designed to address a particular need, but as a whole, they're generally meant to be aligned. The first component is home renovation, and it's intended to strategically address those vacant residential properties that are still good candidates for rehab. This component falls squarely within many of the things the land bank has already been doing, and includes both what we're calling in-house rehabs, that is rehabs done directly by the land bank, as well as short-term investor rehab. And that's basically their deed and escrow program. And for those who may not know, the deed and escrow program is specifically intended to spur private investment by local developers, rather than simply handing over title on a promise to bring to rehab a home. The land bank will put together a spec sheet of what's needed to bring a particular house up to code, and then identify private developers who can purchase the property at low cost, and then come in and complete the repairs in a short time frame. Once the rehab's complete, the land bank transfers title to the private developer. So they hold the title to the property in escrow until they've seen that those repairs have actually been done. This program has proven to be very successful in incentivizing short-term investor investment. So that's basically the first component. The second component, it deals with assistance to county homeowners, and it's really intended to help residents acquire affordable housing and keep their homes in good repair. We can rehab all the vacant properties in the county, but if you're not helping people who currently live in the county keep their homes up to code, then you're not ultimately going to address the breadth of the problem. So home repair could come in the form of loans, grants, or technical assistance to owner occupants. Rehab can do a lot of good. We'll only see more, but I already mentioned that. As you know, the county already has a number of home repair programs, including the HELP program, the Heritage Home program, and the 4Com program. These are our existing home repair programs. Those are both funded through either CDBG dollars or through the county CD Link Deposit program, which we can talk about more if you have questions. But these existing programs have been very effective, but they have limited capacity in terms of their available dollars. The other part of this program is what we're calling small dollar mortgage assistance. And this is really to help people who are looking to buy homes valued at or below $70,000. And what many people don't realize is that even credit-worthy borrowers often have challenges getting financial institutions to provide these types of small dollar mortgages. Many times the banks can't justify the cost because originating, underwriting, servicing loans of that size doesn't really fit within their return on investment. So that's where the county and the land bank can step in. To be clear, the county won't be issuing mortgages to lenders. Rather, the county could do a number of things from either creating a loan loss reserve to securitize some of these loans, or help originate or bundle loans so banks can issue a bunch of loans at one time, or help service the loans in some form or fashion. And one thing that is unique about this component overall is that this is actually going to be primarily designed and implemented by the county's Department of Development. There are a number of reasons for this, but the most important ones are that development already oversees the county's home repair programs and is best positioned to identify where the greatest need currently exists. And then secondly, many of these activities involve intensive customer service, people calling up on the phone about getting a loan to fix their porch or their roof or what have you. And that's going to require the use of third-party providers to deal with many of the day-to-day issues that may come up, in which the land bank really isn't particularly suited to address. We'll get into the overall funding in a moment, but one final thing to note is that at least $1 million will be dedicated per year for this component alone. So component 3 is the final component of the housing program, and it's the housing market component. It's a set of strategic activities intended to spur private development in the housing market. In particular, it's intended to address what's often known as the cycle of structural disinvestment. In some neighborhoods, the market has gotten so bad that even where private developers have a bona fide interest in rehabbing or constructing new homes, the lack of meaningful real estate comparables can scare away prospective lenders. So you can have a developer who wants to build a new house somewhere, but needs a loan from a bank to do it, and because there isn't a comp in the neighborhood, they sometimes can't. This is an area where the county and the land bank can help catalyze that investment. By strategically rehabbing or constructing new homes, we can basically show the proof of concept so that lenders can mitigate their risk. Additionally, the land bank is going to continue engaging in what we're calling future market activities, and really what that means are strategic planning activities to turn around neighborhoods where revitalization is still kind of a long way off, but where strategic planning can make a big difference over that time frame. We don't expect future market activities will be a large monetary cost, but they're extremely important if the land bank is uniquely situated to perform a lot of these functions. And things like strategic land assembly for big developments, concept development, feasibility studies, things like that. So moving on to funding, this program is designed to be a 6-year program, and the direct funding will come in the form of $5 million a year. So where do those dollars come from? First, the legislation would extend the land bank's DTAC allocation through 2025. As you recall, the DTAC stands for the Delinquent Tax Assessment and Collection Fee. That's a fee that property owners pay if they fall delinquent on their taxes. So there's a fee assessed. The first $7 million of that fee gets allocated to the land bank. That is what has supported the land bank's operations over the last few years, and this would extend that allocation through 2025. The second funding component here, the county will commit $1 million per year from casino revenues. We know there's been a lot of discussion about the use of casino dollars, so if you have any questions about these funds, we'd be happy to address them. But it would be $1 million a year commitment, and as you recall, last year Council created the Community Development Fund, which really is where those casino dollars sit. So community development is really one of the primary purposes of that fund and those revenues, and this is why it's being pulled into the part of this program. And then finally, over the first few years of the program, the county will commit a total of $2.5 million in general fund dollars. And this is really meant to be about some bridge financing for the land bank, because It'll help them ramp up some of their housing activities early on as they gradually shift away from demolition. Because hardest hit funding and county demolition funding goes through at least the next year or two, they're going to continue doing demolitions, and they have a lot of costs associated with that. It costs about $2.5 million a year for the land bank just to hold and maintain a lot of the properties that they have, either pending demolition or post demolition. So they have some of those ongoing costs will continue over the next few years, and so that's why, at least in the first couple years, the general fund is needed to help transition to this, to some of these program activities. But overall, 2/3 of the direct funding will be supported by future land bank DTAC revenues and their existing reserves. The remainder would be supported from those other funding sources. One other thing to note is that we believe there's going to be an opportunity to reinvest up to an additional $10 million from program revenues. As it may have occurred to you, a lot of these program, like rehabs and new constructions, they'll involve sales, market sales, other types of transfers where the land bank will get revenues back in. Any profits that they derive from those sales would be reinvested into the program. So there's a $30 million direct contribution here, but there's a good opportunity that even more can be put into these programs simply through regular program activities. So finally, some other factors about the program that we just want to make sure you're aware of. First, this program is really intended to prioritize affordable and middle market neighborhoods. So, we've heard some concerns about gentrification. That's not what this is about. This is about making sure that, communities and neighborhoods around the county that haven't seen the types of investments you might see from large scale luxury housing developments also receive investment. And so what the legislation requires is that 90% of the land bank activity would take place in census tracts with a median home value at or below 175% of the countywide median single-family home value. In layman's terms, that's about $200,000. So at census tracts where the average home or median home is at $200,000 or below. Second, it leaves open the opportunity to leverage additional investment. We've had conversations with a lot of you as well as others about the concept of bringing in others, including the state, financial institutions, community development corporations, charitable organizations, et cetera. This program explicitly encourages collaboration with additional partners to secure additional program funding aligned with the overall program goals, and both the Land Bank and the Department of Development are eager to help make that happen. So this wasn't intended to foreclose other opportunities out there. It was really meant to be a first step, and if new funding or resources come up that allow us to augment the program in some way, then the county will pursue that. And then finally, from just a housekeeping standpoint, so that you as the oversight body are aware, the legislation includes some reporting requirements. It includes semi-annual reporting from the Land Bank and the Department of Development on the respective portions of the program. And it identifies particular metrics and outcomes that we're looking to see. So things like acquisition and disposition of properties, program budgets, contracting data, minority and women-owned business data, as well as some macro level data like loan default rates, foreclosure rates, vacancy rates, private investment activity, things like that. It's important to remember that there's only so much that this or any public program can do to impact some of those more macroeconomic indicators, but we feel it's important to keep an eye on those metrics to make sure and see how we might be moving the needle. So with that, we'll open it up for questions, and I'd ask Gus to maybe come up and answer any questions that you may have specifically related to the land bank.
All right, thank you for the presentation. I reflect back on a few years ago when we brought the $50 million demolition fund going into the community and talking about it. People were excited, they were genuinely interested, but they pulled at us as well to do multiple other things. They said, well, why aren't you rehabbing? Why aren't you building new homes in these, spark the emerging markets and all of those things? And I just remember pushing back and say, well, let's focus and do this one thing. We want to protect the property value, these dropping property values. Let's do this one thing, and we'll see where we go in the future. Your concerns are legitimate. And we're here now. We're at this moment now where everything you just presented is opportunity to focus, once again, focus on what's before us. So again, thank you for the presentation. At this time, I just want to open it up to committee. Councilwoman Simon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Council President Brady, for leading this effort. So the concerns that I've had ongoing with regard to this plan would be to make sure that the communities who are stakeholders, each particular community has the ability to decide and strategize their own community rather than, I'm not even sure who's doing the strategizing. First, I guess that might be the threshold question when we look at that component of this, but who's strategizing, but more importantly, how do communities have the ability to determine their own destiny?
So what I would say is the legislation, we mentioned has sort of high-level guardrails around, excuse me, the types of neighborhoods where this investment will take place. It basically tasks the land bank with creating guidelines, which written guidelines that basically demonstrate how they will determine more specifically which neighborhoods, which blocks to go into. That being said, the intent, and I think the land bank has had a history of working with both municipalities as well as CDCs to help determine what their priorities are and figure out how to support those priorities.
So the demolition ordinance that we set forth gave the communities the ability to take properties, have a right of first refusal for demo, and make their own determination whether property should be demoed or not. In this case, when we're looking at rehab and strategic investments, I would like to see the same protections put in place for communities if they're, I want to make sure that's firmed up, but I'm not hearing that.
I think one of the differences between the demolition program and this program is that the demolition program, the bulk of the demos that occurred required the, declaration of blight in a particular, and this was something that not only did we think the cities had the cities had the power to do that, to declare something a blight or a nuisance, but then additionally they had their ears a little bit closer to the ground when it comes to, than the county does, at least, when it comes to determining which houses are nuisances or blights. And so that municipal power was required for that particular program. This program differs because we're not just looking at sort of a taking and knocking down a house. We're looking at both market indications and whether or not a house is suitable for a rehab and the rehab investment that occurs. And I think our model when it comes to the rehab in particular, looking at the program, is the deed and escrow and the in-house rehab. And these programs are currently ongoing. These rehabs are currently going on in cities around the county. And so an expansion of those, putting the properties back into the market as opposed to being vacant and abandoned and blighted. Given that the land bank has a track record of doing this already well and selecting the houses that are suitable for that kind of investment as opposed to maybe the market forces maybe aren't really ready for a house to be rehabbed, we thought that it was in the best interest of the efficiency of the program not to split the sort of the decision-making power and determining that in the legislation that each municipality would have the ability, beyond what the ability that they have now, to inhibit rehab activity.
Okay, for purpose, I'm not going to, this is probably my third question, but it's more a statement. I am going to seek amendments that the communities who have the ability, who you even stated have the ears on the ground, they know their communities. Some communities have the ability in a housing department strong enough to make these determinations. And I am going to seek an amendment. I think we've talked about this when we were coming up with the legislation, that I don't want communities left out and losing their control over their local strategic planning. Some have that capability better than others, and I think this would be really helpful for communities that don't have a robust housing department. But when we're going to abdicate the city's ears and eyes on the ground to the land bank, I'm not in favor of that. And so I would like to see an amendment, and I guess I need to work on it because we've talked about that before this went to print.
Any further questions? Yes, Councilwoman Baker.
Yes, thank you. In the presentation for the land bank and its goals, it has reclaim and rehabilitate. Do we have a history of those homes that were rehabilitated within the land bank over the time that they have been, for the most part, in demolish mode?
Sorry, about the demolition or the rehab?
The rehab, because that's what we're transitioning to.
Right.
Do we have a history of success of rehabbing
Yeah,
particular
so
homes?
I defer to Gus if he had specific numbers to give you, but my understanding, based on the last numbers I saw, is that their deed and escrow program has been in existence for a long time now. They've ultimately effectuated rehabs for, I think it's somewhere in the range of 1,700 properties over the last decade. And then they've done a number of in-house rehabs, and smaller number, but around 80 some. And they've been able to do those in-house rehabs and actually sell those properties at a pretty quick clip. So, Gus, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but.
That's accurate.
Is there, if I may, is there a reason why we can't just continue with that, given it's successful, and just, put it more of a goal rather than demolish?
Well, that actually is part of the component one of the program is really expanding those existing rehab programs. It's really, it's less about creating at least that component, it's less about creating a new thing and more about shifting the focus from demolition, because right now, the land bank's doing over 1,200 demolitions a year. I think that's the right number. And so that's the bulk of their activity. So as hardest hit funding winds down, as the county's demo funding winds down, it's about reallocating resources and refocusing on the rehab side of things.
Right.
To be clear, because I know there have been a lot of either confusions or questions about this, is that nothing in this program will displace or remove or claw back any demolition funding that's been allocated to date. And there's even a possibility that there could be some more demolition funding coming from the state, but at this point, it doesn't look like it's going to be to the size or dollar amount that would necessitate a longer term, extension of demolition related activities.
Just another addendum to that, and also in response to your question, nothing in this program supplants or inhibits or stops any municipal investment in properties either. The municipalities would not be restricted in any way from pursuing their own, programs or projects in their jurisdictions.
If I may, just one for now.
And if I might add to that, maybe at some point, Councilman Brancatelli could share how he has a very strong CDC that does a lot of good work. They can talk how this might partner with them. It doesn't have to happen right now. Allow Councilwoman to.
Moving forward, if this is, and we ramp up the rehabilitation of homes that we hadn't considered before, how, and maybe this is a good question for Mr. Frangos, how will we manage the lead paint, lead pipes with water, asbestos? Because most of these homes, as said in this presentation, are 50 years or more and probably have all three of those. And of course, if we're going to rehab and not demolish, they have to be safe. So how do we handle the water with lead piping, the lead paint, and the asbestos that are probably the three top hazardous materials in these homes?
Well, I'll let Gus talk about their rehab protocols in just a second. I will note that as it relates to lead, not only will the rehab side of this help address it, but I think the homeowner assistance component can as well, right? Because if you have homeowners who are trying to keep their house up to code, if that type of assistance helps them, do repairs or other things that could help remediate or seal in lead, then that can have a benefit for the lead issue as well. But I'll turn it over to Gus to talk more particularly about their procedures.
Turn over to Dennis.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to turn the question over to Dennis because we do address the asbestos part. We also address, open lead and paint and things like that. Although we're not a lead remediation organization, it's a whole another issue. But the point is well taken. We need to have safe and secure housing. I wanted to make one comment about the collaboration with the municipalities that Councilwoman Simon brought up because it's an important issue, and part of our reputation and goodwill with everybody is to make sure that we do that. So we would look forward to continuing that cooperation and trying to assure all of you as well as Councilwoman Simon that we do that. One of the ways that we do it structurally, so that everybody knows that the CDCs, the cities, all of the stakeholders have what's called access to NST, which is all of the data in one place for their housing, for all of their typologies, all of the stuff that goes into their community development activities. And much of those 1,800 houses that we have done come from them because we are not on the ground seeing that. And we actually look forward to those collaborations to tell us where to go. When the municipalities don't supply what we call one-offs, Mr. Schramm, who couldn't be here today, submits batches every year to the county prosecutor for things that we think are sensible acquisitions based on spatial analytics. Where does the city have properties? Where is there something going on? Where are there schools? Where are there things that are more on the macro level? But the cities are the ones that pretty much, and the CDCs give us a lot of the information that we do on the ground because for that very reason. So we would support what Councilwoman Simon is saying. I don't know, we would not want our hands to be tied in that regard because then, it just would impede the efficiency of it. But as far as the issue itself, we have to always collaborate. Dennis, if you want to discuss the specifics of our asbestos and how we handle that, that's.
Sure. Good morning, Dennis Roberts again. First, we follow all requirements of law with regard to lead and asbestos. As a practical matter, if we determine the property has asbestos in it, a survey was done, we mitigate it. As simple as that. We're required to do it under the law, and it keeps people safe. Same thing with lead. There's certain lead-safe practices that we employ. We have that language in our contracts with our contractors, and we abide by that because if you don't, not only is it bad for politics, it's bad for people. We want to make sure that people of Cuyahoga County continue to be healthy or not become unhealthy as a result of something that we've done.
May I follow up there? Yes. And probably the asbestos and the lead paint are not easier, but they can be approached. What about the lead pipe?
Well, essentially, the lead piping that's, for example, under the ground throughout perhaps the city of Cleveland, one of the things that the city of Cleveland is starting to require is the replacement of laterals, which is connecting the main street line to a newly constructed house. The city is essentially making developers replace those pipes, and we've done so in the two cases in which we've built new houses in Ohio City. So we're very familiar with the issue, and we're capable of dealing with it. The issue, the practical impact of replacing those pipes is that it shifts the cost a little bit to the development, because typically that can run you $12,000 to replace both of those pipes. So if your project is close in terms of the available profit or margin, and you got a $12,000 pipe replacement, it may cause you to make different types of decisions or pick different types of projects.
In this particular rehab, though, where does this lie? If we know that there's lead pipes going into that house, we know there's a program that can mitigate it, and it costs $12,000. Is that a decision that's made by the rehab of this home, by the land bank and county partnership?
Well, there are a number, particularly with a newly constructed home, there are a number of decisions. That's just one price point. If we're required to replace those pipes, we have to replace those pipes. Now, it may mean that some different expenditures have to be made with regard to maybe some finishes that a particular buyer wanted. Again, it's not determinative. It's just one factor that must be considered when analyzing whether one should go forward with a new development.
Okay, thank you.
Just to follow up, and what I was hearing, is the decision being made by the land bank when a house is being rehabbed, or is it someone in the community, a private citizen, saying, I need help rehabbing my home? Where is the start of the process when a home is identified as being eligible or desirous of being rehabbed?
I can try and address that. So I think you've got a couple different components. When we're talking about the rehab component, the homeowner or the home rehabilitation, that's going to be almost entirely land bank driven, right? Those are properties that are in the land bank's inventory, and they're saying these homes are good candidates for rehabilitation. They're going to put together the spec sheet, what it's required to bring the house up to code, and then find developers or people who can come in and actually make those repairs. When you're talking about existing homeowners, that's where the homeowner assistance component comes in. So that's not specifically about rehab. It's about I need to fix my porch, or I need to fix my roof, or I need to fix my HVAC system, whatever it is, to keep my house up to code, or to just like maintain a major system that is necessary for me to keep my house livable. That's going to be something that the land bank really isn't involved in. That's going to be a program that's going to be more designed by our community development division, and will likely be administered through third-party providers of some kind, because that's where you really get the customer service need. So I think when you talk about the repairs in general, it'll be a little bit of both, but when you're talking about rehab specifically, that's going to be driven by the land bank.
So the land bank, you will go through your inventory, and in that part, there's strategy, I assume, how you identify. You're looking at a city block, and how do you rebuild a particular block at a time? Speak a little bit to the strategy.
As I was trying to allude to a little bit earlier, the strategy does come from all of the stakeholders, because our pipeline is predominantly tax foreclosure. So if it's the municipalities, whether it's South Euclid, or whether it's a CDC in Cam's Corner or Glenville, their CDCs or Maple Heights, they'll tell us what properties are important to them, whether it's a block or whether it's a particular area that they're trying to stabilize. We refer those to tax foreclosure, and those are what we call those one-offs, because they're coming directly, sometimes from a citizen, sometimes it's like the city mission or Lutheran ministries that are looking for a house for a particular special population. But on a larger scale, those 1800s, they're typically as a result of tax foreclosures referred by stakeholders, cities, and then the other ones are, of course, on the macro level, the ones that we submit to the treasurer as being our best guess based on typologies. They're educated guesses, and those come through the system, and when they come through the system into our inventory, then we make them available either to CDCs or in-house or our special partners, whether they be the mission or some particular, the sewer district, or somebody that needs land. So that is the strategy. I think what this affords us the opportunity to do is to really go into what I would call micro neighborhoods, going into areas where we know there's a strategy. For example, Circle North or Metro West in that area. We obviously can't take every single thing and do everything within a 1 year period. But what we can do is we can find available inventory that we can refer to tax foreclosure and do micro strategies to do that. That's what I think this program really allows us to do, because now we can go on to one block and actually fix, several houses on that block. Maybe go to the elected official and get new sidewalks in that area, actually go up and down that street and paint all the houses for the sole purpose of establishing comps, establishing that block, and making a difference, and then just moving on to the next one. So a lot of that data is available to all of us, but it's the granular work that needs to be done to really nail, block on a block level, which we fully intend to do.
Gus, what you're saying reminds me of Councilwoman Fannie Lewis, who 15 years ago created the City Rama. He took an entire city block just off of East 55th Street, and there were older homes on one side of the street, but the other side was pretty much vacant. maybe a few vacant houses, but just vacant. And developers came in on speculation and built $250,000 homes all along the street. It was landscape, new sidewalking given to everyone, and just beautified an entire city block. And it's still there now, a beautiful street. So
Mr. Chairman, and that she was the master at that. I mean, she went from the granular level to the larger level to the, I had the privilege of serving with her in council in those days, and we all learned a lot from her. But there are programs, what's something called model blocks, and it's intended to get real granular, but those are sometimes a little bit once removed from the CDCs. Anthony Brancatelli, our chairman, is here. We're doing that, for example, with the Slavic Village Recovery Project. It would be an example that I would present to all of you as one of the ways that this would be done. He could architect of it, so it would, if he would give us a...
I'll share one other thing. Just on this concept, on my own street, my wife and I built a beautiful house and a new home, but it's right there on the east side of Cleveland, not far from Cleveland Clinic, a depressed neighborhood, impoverished neighborhood. But it's where my business is. I'm going to stay in that house and I'm going to die there. But the property values obviously came down when I built the home that we built. What this does could transform, again, an entire block and protect property values. I just remember the local media, and they may not have hit the paper and maybe did not, didn't pay attention. But when we were discussing the property taxes, my property taxes of all the elected officials was the lowest. And there was a question for me as to why was Councilman Jones's property taxes so low? What did that councilman do in county government? Why his property taxes are so low? As if I had done something wrong, But the crime wasn't in me, it was in the neighborhood around which I built and all that was going on in the disinvestment. So this speaks to that type of investment that not only would protect our property values, but our neighbors in the far outer reaches and outer rings of our county. They may live closer to another county home, may have a closer neighbor, but their property taxes are tied more closely to the tax burden in East Cleveland, and many hands make light work. So as we protect this is a benefit, I believe, for even those in the outer ring who may find they don't need as much rehab. But with that, please go right ahead.
No, thank you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to say a few words today, and I apologize, I will be leaving shortly. We have a chairman's meeting, and my other boss is asking me to come and make sure I participate for our Development Planning Sustainability Committee. But I just wanted to talk about a broader reach, and I think certainly, as Councilman Simon talked about, being able to strategically go into neighborhoods and go into blocks. The Slavic Village Recovery Partnership that was done with the late Robert Klein and Albert Ratner was really a good example of being able to utilize the tools that the county already has in place, where we can go do an analysis, work with our partners like CASE and our NST program, where we can do an analysis of a block by block, see which houses that we're going to recommend to be foreclosed on, the abandoned ones that we can't take through our BOR sale, and also work with our existing partners where we can look at an entire block and basically what looks like a benefits checkup. And the Senior Housing Assistance Program in the city of Cleveland is a great example of that. When a senior comes in and asks for assistance, they just don't say, well, do you need a hot water tank replaced? They look at, do you need homestead? Do you need a roof? Are there other things that we can bring to you, whether it's looking at getting public transportation or senior transportation? That benefits checkup can occur on a block where we go down the street, and this program is a great example of being able to have the resources that can go out and help somebody maybe paint their home, can go out and maybe put a roof on the house or replace a water line. And I think as Councilman Baker talked about the lead program, there was a horrible quote in the Plain Dealer around lead this past week. The public has waited for years through mismanagement, inaction, and inadequate measures from our city leaders. It's just not true. You guys have put money towards demolition, which has really helped remove very toxic and blighted properties. The county land bank has renovated over 1,000 properties. And those renovations really take away those lead risks that are in there. And the leadership here has said we're not keeping lead water lines in our properties. If there's a lead corroded water line, that gets replaced as part of the rehab specs. And so when we go through and work strategically, we write a set of specs for every property, and it has a scope of work
So when you talk about a deed and escrow, which is one of the growing programs and one of the programs that we look to expand here, that's where we can say, here's what needs to be done, whether it's replacement windows, whether it's replacing the water lines, getting rid of the lead. Comprehensively, you can see where the city of Cleveland has done over 10,000 inspections already in a rental registration unit. They've done a significant amount around lead swipes and making homes safer. This kind of program expands that and makes our neighborhoods safer through environmental toxins. It helps improve property values, and it helps really raise the quality of life in these particular neighborhoods. And when someone talked earlier around helping on the smaller contractors or helping with the smaller neighborhoods, one of the things that we pride at the County Land Bank is the fact that they work with small contractors. They work with local contractors. It's not a matter of having a large developer come in and say, we're going to build 100 houses now throughout the city and we're going to use those county resources. It's very interesting to see when you have contractors, and especially around contractors who work in particular neighborhoods, and say, I just like working in a Glenville neighborhood and I'm going to work on those houses in that area. I just like working in the Mount Pleasant neighborhood, or I just like working in Slavic Village. Contractors and developers all have their little niche markets that they enjoy, and that's what this program can do, is help enhance and bring an opportunity for them to do additional investments where the gap and the just doesn't meet between our appraisals, which we have to nudge the market and help improve. When we first did Mill Creek years ago, we went very specifically and with very strict direction that we were going to start working on some small rehabs, some small home repair loans, working with Cleveland Housing Network, and saying, okay, we're going to come in and start bumping the market a little bit. And that's when we were able to move to a larger scale development where we did 200 new units at Mill Creek. But it took those early interventions, which is what this program is about, do early interventions in some of the markets that don't have the kind of high quality of housing that you may see in our robust markets, and be able to go in there and say, let's start helping push that market a little bit more. And we have programs that we can bring in all our other partners, whether it's the City of Cleveland Community Development or whether it's other cities and municipalities that already have programs available. And that's where working with those other municipalities, as Gus had stated, the CDCs and municipalities all have access to the information well before anyone else does. So they're the ones who are actually feeding the system and bringing properties in and say, let's bring these in, let's get them in the system. So we already have an idea of what's going on. And that's what I continue to lecture when I talk to the community development departments and other municipalities, is keep an eye on that land bank. That's a tool that you can use in helping revitalize your neighborhood. And that partnership has worked well, where you see a lot of CDCs, and we see it with Kamala and others that come around to the table on a regular basis saying, let's get these into the system and let's work on a strategic plan in those areas.
Excellent. Any questions from the committee? Can local churches participate in any way? We know the CDCs, but are there opportunities for?
Well, Mr. Chairman, the local churches, as any citizen, can participate, but we do, with churches and certain nonprofits and social service agencies, we call those special projects. They're able to come in, and if they have philanthropy, if they have the ability to rehab a home, and they have a special, they're addressing a special population, we do allow them to participate. We typically don't charge them for that. But otherwise, we don't make any distinction between a private citizen that comes to us and wants to rehab a home, or to help us find them a home, and a church or a place of worship or a social service agency like Lutheran or Women of Hope, veterans, a special population. We just give those, we do make a dispensation on the price. It's usually like $1 and the transaction costs. So we've done quite a few of those, and it's a good way to allow these organizations to build their capacity to serve their particular constituencies as well.
Also, one additional point is that the churches, or any religious organization or cultural organization or civic organization that chooses to, can participate in this program by reaching out to their constituencies and maybe assisting, whether that's parishioners or even people in the neighborhood that they happen to be located in, reaching out to those people and assisting them in reaching out to the county if people in that neighborhood need home repair loans or home repair technical assistance, and assisting them with the process of applying, learning about it, and spreading the word. And in that way, all of these organizations can participate in this program that would benefit their communities.
Chair.
Council,
Thank you. My question has to do with the time frame and the schedule. Suppose everything here is agreed upon. There are a few amendments and changes. What is the practical time frame that the first of our residents county-wide would be able to benefit from this program?
Thank you. So the program is really designed to start in 2020. That's sort of the funding timeframe at the very least. I think the concept would be if this council decides to move forward and adopt this program early this year, then both the land bank can do some work to start ramping up the activities that they'll be basically overseeing, and our Department of Development can start designing the homeowner assistance component. So that they can hit the ground running early next year. The idea would be that because this will involve some general fund and casino dollars, that it will be built. It would be built into the biennial budget, which this council will be hearing this fall for the 2021 biennial budget.
As you know, currently, when individuals want to do rehab on their home, which is a component that is proposed today, if they're in an entitlement community, they are not able to benefit from county rehab programs. So this program, for the first time, bridges that transition and allows in Cleveland, Lakewood, Cleveland Heights, Parma, Euclid, residents to ask the county to help them do rehab. Are we going to be less restrictive in our requirements for participation than the traditional programs have been? Or are we going to be creative in helping, for example, seniors who have limited incomes do repair work on their homes?
Right. So that's a great question. We actually, you're spot on about the entitlement communities as it relates to the CDBG supported programs, because as you know, the county CDBG can only be spent in those communities that aren't considered entitlement communities. We do have two other home repair programs, the Heritage Home Program and the HELP program, which are not supported by CDBG dollars. They're the county's link deposit program, but they I don't believe have geographic restrictions, but they do have other restrictions. So the Heritage program is really only for homes over 50 years old, and there are other requirements, I'm sure.
So we could bridge our activities until we get to the partnership now with these kinds of programs.
Yes, and I would say that the whole concept of having development design this additional program is that it's really meant to complement those existing programs, because as you know, there are strings, there are limitations, there are eligibility criteria that aren't always going to be, while we do want some parameters around this, and this program will have parameters as well, we want to make sure the parameters for this program are either supplementing a need that it currently exists and is being unmet, or in some other way complements the existing programs we currently have.
And just to add to that, there are some restrictions on this program geographically, and that has to do with the home value, the median home value in a particular census tract. As we stated earlier, the 175% of the countywide median home value will be used to determine whether or not a census tract is eligible. Now, additionally, I don't believe that in the creation of both the program design for the homeowner assistance program that will be designed by the Department of Development, and the ongoing program and the additional programming that will be designed by the County Land Bank, both of these program designs will be presented to Council in 2019, in advance of the implementation of those programs. Over the course of this year, if this program is approved by Council, the program design will also be presented to Council for review. So those sorts of questions can be explored more deeply when we get into program design. And one thing that I would like to note, based on the other housing assistance programs that we currently offer here at the county, the Department of Development, Division of Community Development, will be able to take a look at an applicant and see whether or not that person would be best served by the currently existing programs that we offer now and the new program as well. So they'll be able to on a case-by-case, determine whether or not this particular repair is eligible for, let's say, Heritage Home Program, and thereby increase the amount of reach that our new program will have.
I have one other question, Mr. Chair.
Could I? No, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
One of the things that was talked about here, and this is my penchant to go for details, physical disbursement is supposed to remain with the land bank. What does that mean?
So basically, for the sake of coherence and consistency around the program, the land bank will act as the fiscal agent for the overall program. And part of the reason we did this is because I think it's going to be more efficient and more cost effective to do a lot of the things with the land bank as fiscal agent. Practically what that's going to mean, particularly for the homeowner assistance component, is that while the county Department of Development will be actually designing and selecting and overseeing, doing the monitoring, contract monitoring and oversight, they'll basically have the land bank be the contracting entity with third-party providers, any third-party providers that come into play. So that was more of a logistical
So is it
issue,
meant
but-
to facilitate more efficient disbursements of funding?
Correct. Prompt payments, procurement, things like that.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Just want to discuss how we leverage these dollars. In fact, I'll come back to the earlier comment in Cheryl's question. You mentioned the help program and linked deposits. Obviously, when we deposit our county dollars, we get service for the reduced interest the banks provide. So I remember help program is through Lakewood, Federal Lakewood Bank.
I think First Federal of Lakewood is one of the
First Federal
banks.
is one,
I think
but-
Key is another, and
But here's the distinction.
Yeah.
The distinction is the help program is actually through Lakewood. Key Bank, the things they provide for us for our discounted interest are more, I want to describe them as transactional. It's not necessarily a direct benefit to the community like the help program. Okay.
yeah, Ken. Ken would probably be better equipped to
He can
address the
sort of yes or no
details
that,
of
but
this.
that is my understanding to this point. And those other banks have the larger deposits. So the thrust of my point is, I believe there's more that the banks can do in terms of service. Has that conversation, and Ken can still come on up. Conversation of, again, leveraging these dollars, what banks can help, and just what are your thoughts around the whole subject?
Well, just to just quickly address that point, this program certainly does envision the potential for increased investment from other parties, whether it be banks, philanthropy, municipalities, to increase the impact of this program. This legislation doesn't mandate any particular deposit scheme that would involve that, but that's something that we definitely envisioned in designing the legislation to allow for an additional investment in that way. And that kind of discussion has been had repeatedly, and I'm sure will continue to be had if you have any more.
Sure. Ken Sorrow with the Department of Development. I wholeheartedly agree that this legislation, once passed, will be a great source of leverage to bring the banks to the table, as well as other and potentially foundations as well. I think seeing a serious commitment here, hopefully to leverage bank loans. There's definitely been some concern in many parts of the county about the lack of lending, particularly first mortgages, home repair as well. I think, to the bank's point, it's mostly about a risk calculation that they got to take. Is there a way that we can potentially use this investment to help reduce that risk, and actually expand the amount of money that goes out to our communities? To me, that would be an ideal situation.
And I agree. I'd like to see construction loan rates leveraged to bring those rates down. Obviously, the housing loan rates, those things. So that conversation definitely should be had. Councilwoman Simon.
I think this is for staff The question I have is about outsourcing oversight of our county general fund dollars to the land bank for the home repair administration. We at the county have we have procurement, we have RFQs, we have oversight, and what I think I'm hearing now is that we're just abdicating that oversight, except for about twice a year coming in. I don't know that we can do that and why we're doing this other than efficiency of a program. These are county dollars that we're asking the land bank then to use instead of us internally going through our programs that we established when we started the new government with procurement and all of those safeguards that were put in place. And I don't see that happening once we give up county money. We don't have those same safeguards.
Councilwoman, I think that's a fair point. I will say that, I wouldn't necessarily view this as much different than subsidies that the county gives to other independent entities, whether it be Metro Health or Adams Board. I mean, we provide subsidies to other quasi-autonomous governmental entities that have their own procurement and other processes that are separate and apart from the counties. So, I mean, that is ultimately a policy determination. So, if you want to amend the legislation or if this council decides to go forward with that, we could have the county still, retain control at least over that component of those dollars. But it's not, I wouldn't say it's unprecedented that we've done.
Well, this is different, Mike, and to turn over an entire, our dollars in that way to a whole establishment of a program, that's not what Metro's doing. We are subsidizing an existing program that they have been doing, and this is different. We're developing the program, and then we're going to turn it over to a third party to administer. This is much different, and I have to say I'm not comfortable with it unless I can, why we would be doing such a thing. And historically with the HELP, with Heritage, all of the assistance programs since I started my life on City Council in South Euclid have been handled by the county and Department of Development. And now for some reason, maybe there's a good one, that's going away. And I'm not comfortable with the RFQ process. I'm sorry, leaving council.
Just to clarify, I did want to point out that the homeowner assistance program would still be monitored by the Department of Development, Division of Community Development, and any third parties that would be contracted to perform some of the duties of that program would be, that selection would be done by the Department of Development as well.
Be issuing, I'm sorry, clarification, the RFQs, or they're just watching what the land bank's doing?
No, my understanding is that the Department of Development would, and this can, I'm sure, be negotiated between the Department of Development and the land bank, but the idea is that the selection process would be done by the department. And functionally, the land bank would be paying, and that would be the function of the land bank, not contract monitoring, not third-party selection, but simply cutting the check to make sure that these payments are prompt.
The Department of Development not only creating the program, but to some extent participating and operating it. They are administering the program, but the dollars are going to land bank then to turn back to the county?
Well, not to the county. They would be contracting with the third party, but the selection process and the monitoring would take place in the department.
Wouldn't that be less efficient?
It would not.
Okay.
Question again to the land bank. As the rehabbing takes place and you interact with the rehabbers, we heard a public comment from a gentleman who was concerned about maybe the lack of ability to self-fund during the deed and escrow. If you remember his question, can you speak maybe in general to how this legislation might empower rehabbers, and if there are any shortcomings for them, maybe speak to that?
Sure. Well, one of the ways that the legislation, I think, could empower rehabbers is that it helps bring this program to scale. So more people can participate, more investors are able to obtain a house from the county and do a rehab. The way the county deed and escrow program functions is that as long as an investor can demonstrate that they can actually get the job done, we're pretty open to how they get there. In other words, they can be creative, they can have work done in kind, donations, We just want to see a modicum of evidence that supports that it really can happen, i.e. a letter from an electrician if he says he's going to do some work for you for free. So we're very flexible now, and we'll continue to be, and perhaps we could be even more flexible if we were able to take the program to a more significant scale. Our objective with the program is to get these properties back on the tax duplicate and hopefully help some investor make some money and also help some homeowner, in those cases, obtain good, secure housing. So we're very open and flexible with regard to helping individuals build capacity.
All right, any further questions? Counsel?
To that point, wouldn't, if someone's having work done on a house, be it electrical or concrete or whatnot, wouldn't it be incumbent on the city itself to have the permit to do that work, or at least to approve it and then check it? So that would be your hard evidence that the job was done?
Yes, Councilman, absolutely. All our jobs, we require that individuals pull permits and get those permits closed by the city. What I was referring to is that when an individual comes forward before they've even engaged with the city, and we know the house requires $50,000 in renovation, we ask that that individual show us that they have the financial capability to get the job done, even before you get to a point of pulling permits.
Any further questions? If not, all right, this legislation will be held in committee.
Mr. Chair.
And, yes.
Sorry to interrupt. There is a proposed substitute before you today. It is purely housekeeping. It is simply, the legislation is introduced, included some language from an earlier draft. This basically just updates it so it's fully in line. If the committee is open to entertain it today, that we just wanted to make sure you were aware of it. If not, we can defer to a later committee meeting.
All right. Unless there are any questions about the proposed substitute, I'll make a motion that we introduce this proposed substitute as a working piece of legislation. Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. 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 All right. Our next meeting will be January 28th, right here in Community Development, 10 a.m., and we will continue dealing with this legislation. Any final comments or concerns? All right.
I just want to thank Councilman Brackatelli before he walks out the door for coming over today. Thank you. I know it's a busy day over at the hall. Thank you, Councilman.
Excellent. All right. If there's no miscellaneous business, if nothing else holds our attention, our meeting is now adjourned.